I will speak first of the negative part of this commandment, secondly of the affirmative. Under the former are forbidden these two things. First, more largely, all evil speaking that may be anyways hurtful to our neighbors, with respect either to their lives or goods, or good name, especially the last, which is more eminently concerned in this commandment. First, more generally, all the abuses of the tongue are here forbidden, all evil speaking that may any ways prove hurtful to others. Nay, those words and speeches which are unprofitable are forbid by this commandment, for these in some kind are hurtful to others. Thus far, the tongue offends against the souls of our neighbors. Secondly, more particularly here is forbid that evil speaking which is hurtful to the bodies, estates, and good names of our brethren. Hitherto I have spoken of that injury which is done to our neighbors by words in our common converse. Now I proceed to speak of the injury done by them in public courts of judicature. For bearing false witness is either judicial, when a man is called to speak the truth publicly, or extrajudicial, between man and man in a more private manner. David complained that false witnesses did rise up, and laid to his charge things he knew not. Psalm 35:11. The Jewish priests sought false witnesses against Jesus to put him to death. Matthew 26:59. And at last came two false witnesses, verse 60, and their particular accusation is set down in the next verse. We read that the Jews set up false witnesses against Stephen, who said, "This man ceases not to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law." Acts 6:15. This is a great sin, and the rather because witnesses in judicial courts are under the obligation of an oath to deliver the truth, on which account they involve themselves in the guilt of perjury. Not only witnesses, but all that have business in public courts, and appertain to the law, are nearly concerned in this commandment. Thus I have treated of the several faults and miscarriages of the tongue that are comprised under this commandment. It remains now that I offer the reasons why we should regulate these disorders, and that I prescribe the method how this may be effected. Under the first, I will do these two things. First, in general show why we should redress the abuses of the tongue. Secondly, why more particularly that abuse of it which consists in lying and slandering. As to the former of these, the reasonableness of it will appear from these ensuing particulars. First, on the tongue hangs the greatest good. Quote, "What man is he that desireth life, and loveth many days, that he may see good? Keep thy tongue from evil, and thy lips from speaking guile." Psalm 34, verse 12 and 13. Secondly, because it is the source of so many and so great evils. James 3:6. Thirdly, we are to answer at the last day for our words, as well as our actions. Matthew 12:36 and 37. In the next place, more particularly, I am to give the reasons why we should refrain from lying and slandering. I will speak distinctly of both. First, there are very great reasons why we should abstain from telling of lies. They are such as these. 1. We are to do it by virtue of the divine precept. Keep thee a false matter, Exodus 23:7. This is, be not any ways accessory or assisting in promoting of that which is false, but abstain from it, and show thy dislike of it. 2. It is base and ignoble to tell a lie. 3. It is clearly against the use and ends of speech. 4. It is odious to God. 5. It is abominated by men. 6. It is the work of the devil. My next task is to show how and by what means we may restrain the abuses of the tongue. First, we must avoid too much speaking, and use ourselves to silence and reservedness. In the multitude of words there wants not sin. Proverbs 10:19. Therefore here we ought to restrain ourselves, and to utter things with deliberation. Secondly, we are to look to our hearts, and to keep them with all diligence. For the tongue follows the motion of the heart, and our words are the product of our inward disposition. Thirdly, to cure most of the maladies of the tongue, be careful that you be not busybodies in other men's matters. Fourthly, avoid excess in drink, and the company of those that are addicted to that vice. For such persons generally have no guard on their tongues. When the wine inflames the company, then this wildfire flies about. Fifthly, avoid passion, the drunkenness of the mind. None offend more with their tongues than the angry and choleric. Wherefore the remedy against the evil of the tongue prescribed by St. James is meekness. James 3:13. Hitherto I have mentioned those abuses of the tongue which are directly forbid in this part of the Decalogue. Now I shall take notice of that which may be reduced to it, and that is unlawful censuring and judging of our neighbors. For I go upon that rule which I grounded on Christ's exposition of the commandments, namely, that the inward acts of the mind which have reference to the external acts of sin, forbid in these commandments, are also here forbid. Judging of our neighbors is a disposition of mind that prepares the way for bearing false witness against them, for making use of our tongues to their hurt. Wherefore it is remarkable that speaking evil of our brother and judging our brother are coupled together. James 4:11. This latter, then, is at least condemned in this commandment, it being an inward witnessing of the mind, and so is a false testimony borne against our brethren. Judging others is unlawful either in respect of the matter or the manner of this judging. As to the matter or objects, first, it is unlawful to judge peremptorily of our neighbors from their former actions, and what they themselves once were. Secondly, as we must not rashly judge of men from their actions before their conversion, so not altogether from those after it. For we are to remember that the best men are not free from their frailties and infirmities. Thirdly, judge not of the secret thoughts of men. This is a prerogative that God only can claim. Men's hearts are sometimes better than their lives, and therefore this should check us in our judging of them. Fourthly, judge not men for things indifferent, not for any opinion or practice disagreeing from ours in matters of that nature. Fifthly, judge not from common accidents and events, such as worldly crosses, poverty, disgrace, sickness, and diseases. Judge not from these concerning the guilt of any person, as we have little reason to think our own state good, because it is prosperous. So we have as little to censure and condemn another because it is calamitous. Sixthly, judge not of the future and eternal state of any, nor of the decrees of God concerning them, thus far as to the matter or object of our judging. Next, as to the manner or principle and motive, it is unlawful in any case to judge and censure our neighbors on weak and insufficient grounds, as first, on surmises and conjectures. Secondly, all judging of others is unlawful that is grounded on bare reports and flying rumors. Common fame hath been a liar, and therefore she must not be trusted. Thirdly, that judging and censuring is very blamable, that proceeds from prejudice and prepossession. And again, judging of others is unlawful, when the person that exercises this severity is guilty of the same errors and miscarriages which he condemns in them. Romans 2:1. Hitherto of the negative part of this commandment. Now for the affirmative. First, this commandment obliges us to use our tongues, to bear witness with them. It is not an indifferent thing whether we speak or not. For speech distinguishes us from dumb animals, and therefore we act contrary to our nature if we imitate those mute creatures and affect to be speechless. We know that reason and religion bid us employ that useful member which God hath furnished us with, and they acquaint us that it is a sin to do otherwise. Secondly, it is required by this commandment that we make use of our speech for good and useful purposes. Though we differ from brutes as to speech, yet if we speak without reason, the difference is but little between them and us. For barely to speak is no excellency of itself. To form and pronounce certain words is not denied to parrots and some other birds. Wherefore there must be something else to commend the gift of speaking, and that is reason. Thirdly, it is more particularly enjoined here that we speak truth, and thereby edify our brethren. The virtue opposite to lying is truth. The duty that is opposed to bearing false witness is bearing true witness. In two cases more especially, we should be very careful of speaking what is true. First, in religious matters. Secondly, when we converse with children and young people. Thirdly, this commandment requires us to preserve and maintain, as much as in us lies, the good name of our neighbors. This doth not imply that we should take no notice of the faults that are in them, or that we should praise the bad, and commend those whom we know to be such, and so make no distinction between light and darkness, good and evil. But the duty is that we seek not out for occasion to speak ill of others, that as we observe what is faulty in them, and reprove them for it, so we take notice of what is really commendable, and applaud it.